everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Master Instructor Roundtable. My name is Wendy Batts, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Mr. Marty Miller. Marty, how are you today?
Great, Wendy. Looking forward to this week.
Yes, I love this topic. I love everything about this topic because you and I talk a lot about exercises and different activities. And I think you said that you had someone ask you, well, what's the difference? And so that is the reason for this week's episode. And I mean, again, some of it seems like we should know, oh, it's this versus that. But I think sometimes I don't think it needs to be versus, but I think it should be and personally. And I'm excited about today.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll get some clarity on it and give some, people some understanding of what we mean by it, but also how can you translate this into your client's mindset and thought process?
Yes. So let's dive on in.
Let's get to it.
So today we're going to actually talk about the differences between exercise and activity. And then truly, how much exercise do we need? And then obviously, we're going to talk about what you and I do, Marty, and then how active we need to be when this question comes up. Do you really know how to answer that for your clients? And hopefully by today, you will.
Exactly. I'm sure they will, actually. So when we look at exercise versus activity, obviously there's going to be some carryover between them. But, when we look at it, we've got to look at the total energy expenditure factors, right? So if we're looking at the two that we have the arrow on, right? So let's look at the bottom left first. Calories burned during exercise, amount of calories in a workout. So that workout, we're going to kind of say is a structure. It could be any phase of the model. It could be taking a class, whether it's a yoga or a high intensity class or a Pilates class. Then we have the other factor, the non-exercise activity thermogenics, or you've seen this term before called NEAT, the amount of energy the body uses to do daily activity. So how active are you? Do you have a job that requires you to be moving all day? Do you have a job that requires you to be sitting all day? What do you do with your free time? So that's going to be a big part of the difference between exercise and activity.
Yeah. And I think this is important too, because, I know for me, I'm a very neat person. I am always doing activities of daily living around my household. So I vacuum all the time. I'm cleaning, I'm running up and down stairs. I'm lifting heavy things, moving it from one room to another. And then of course I have a very active 7-year-old. And so those are activities that I do, but those are also activities I do every day almost. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm trying to think about increasing, my calorie expenditure or, really thinking ahead, I want you guys to think what you're doing. Yes, it counts for something. And if you look about how many calories I'm burning throughout the day, however, if I need more, I need to think about what else can I do to then expend more than I currently am. And I think oftentimes we're like, well, I'm pretty active at home. Well, I have to clean my house. Well, I do this, that, and the other. If it's something that you're already doing, those calories are kind of what I say accounted for. So now I've got to try to look into some other place where I can try to do other activities that maybe I need to get done anyway. And see if maybe that will help increase my, my calories that I needed to expend in order to hit like a weight loss goal, for example.
Right. And I actually had to do it the other way around when I was at the country club for 6-7 years before coming to the job that I have now. I would track it. I could walk anywhere between 3 to 6 miles a day just at work. I rarely sat down. So I had hundreds of extra calories right there. Of course, I was going to do my exercise, but I was in a situation where I didn't want to lose weight. So I actually, one, just out of pure hunger, and two, out of knowing that I was busier, I would kind of, coordinate snacks and things like that to make sure I could maintain the weight. Somebody might want to do the opposite way, but for me, with that extra 3 to 6 miles is hundreds of calories a day that I had to account for in eating the right way to maintain my weight. Now, even though I still get a lot of my exercise in, I've actually had to put in more structured exercise because I don't get those accidental calories by just walking. Now, you'll see later on, I purposely do walk, and it's not necessarily for the calorie burn. It's for just getting out of a seated position, keeping my hips moving, things like that. But I went from a job that I never sat down to a job where I could be stuck on a plane for 6 hours.
You're stuck on a plane all the time, Marty. Again, here's the where's Marty instead of where's Waldo. So as you guys know, if Marty doesn't seem to be at home very often, so it's interesting to find out where he travels to. But I do think, obviously there is a big difference, and we need to and have both. And so if we go even to the next slide, when we start kind of digging deeper into like how many or how much exercise do we actually need? Well, when you're looking at aerobic activity, here you want to get at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity per week. And so a combination of both is obviously something that I think is very beneficial. And then if you look at the other stats from Mayo Clinic here, while in 2018, physical activity guidelines recommended that adults engage in at least 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate exercise, 75 to 150 minutes each week of vigorous movement, or an equivalent combination of both intensity. So it turns out that if adults do move more than the recommended amount, it can help them live longer.
And if you go back to our health span versus lifespan, they would live better longer, right? If you're active, you can associate that with better outcomes as well. So if you do the math, because I'll be the math person again, Wendy, I love my numbers. If we look at 300 over 7 days during the week, and let's assume that someone's going to have a day off, still probably want to be active. You're looking at an hour a day, right? Over the 6 days, roughly 50 minutes. So there's some choices that need to be made. I'll purposely get up and I'll walk. I will, I've purchased 2 pieces of cardio for home. There's things you can do, right? To make it easier for you, because if you let your schedule dictate, you're going to probably miss some of your exercise. Where we've talked about time blocking before, just trying to set yourself up for success. So that could be a whole nother conversation to this. Maybe we do a follow-up, Wendy, about how to do all this. How do you get it in? But at a high level it's not going to happen by accident. You've got to make a plan. You got to work that plan. You got to be able to adjust that plan, because people like me travel. You have a child and things change. So, however that is, even if we shot for the minimal, the 150, over 6 days, you're a solid 20, 25 minutes a day. So, how do you get that in?
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of it too is us thinking, we always have to like set aside an hour. I get that in my head. Okay, I've got this, and this plan. I only have this amount of time. It's really not the convenient part of my day. And I think that's when we need to kind of reevaluate when we were talking about time block. Like, okay, you know what? I can't do what some of these other people can do and go and work out at lunch, because afterwards I have important meetings or I have things that I need to look like I didn't just work out. Even if I shower, I still am a hot, sweaty mess afterwards because of, the afterburn that I have going on. And it looks like I pretty much try to kill myself for 30 minutes. So, I think it's important to scheduling it. When you think about it, when Marty says, okay, what's 50 minutes of your day? There's 24 hours in a day. You're taking 1 hour for yourself. I think that's important. And sometimes it's a reality check that you have to give yourself when you say, I just don't have time. Because I know, Marty, you're really good at making time for it. Some of us need to get better, including myself, at looking at these statistics, because it can be added in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's even been studies about how older people live longer when they have a dog, right? Because it's forcing them to walk the dog. So, be creative, right? Wendy, I know your son plays baseball. Maybe at practice, if you're not doing something else, you can jog during the practice. I mean, there's always ways you can sneak it in when it becomes top of mind. That's, I think, what we're trying to do today is make it top of mind.
Yes. And for those that listen to Marty and I am the team mom. So I am actually throwing and catching balls and running after these kids. So I'm actually pretty active during practice. I get my practice in too.
Kind of wise.
But then it brings us to this next slide when we continue on talking about how much activity that we need. So again, we talked about exercise. Now let's look at some activity. Physical inactivity is one of the leading risk factors for non-communicable diseases and mortality. Like, guys, we want to think about this. Like, when you don't move, you're going to get sick. And then at that point, we're going to have some issues. And I think that's the question when you say, lifespan, health span. Somebody's asked me that, like, well, how long do you want to live? And I always ask the question, well, how long am I healthy? how long am I able to live versus just breathe? Because to me, they're two different things. And so when you have somebody that, isn't very active, you have a 20 to 30% increased risk of death, excuse me, compared to people who are active. And so, you know what, those statistics are not good. Nobody wants to die. But then on top of that, guys, just going out for a walk, it doesn't have to be something that's so intense. I think a lot of times just going out for an evening walk with your dog, with your partner, with your child, whatever, and sometimes just communicating, having the fresh air, that is going to help so many people. And it also can help to your body long term.
Yeah. And imagine if we took off the exercise part and we were working with people and we said, hey, we have something that will give you a 20 to 30% better chance of living longer, healthier. They'd be like, sign me up. You got to exercise. Like, ooh, can you put that in a pill? No, right? You can't. You got to move. Your body's required to move. And that's just what our jobs are. So we could get into making it fun, making it engaging, making sure they don't get injured, all those things. But your body requires movement. And it requires it daily. And people are like, do you exercise 7 days a week? I'm like, no, but I'm active 7 days a week. And I always joke them because I eat 7 days a week. Right. But it's really not necessarily that because I'm not on a weight loss program. It's my body doesn't feel good if I sit too long. It's my body's like, what are you doing? Time to get up, time to move, kind of like get these muscles fired up. So that's just my body craves the movement now.
Mm-hmm. And I will tell everyone, if you haven't been active and you're trying to go from like couch to something's better than nothing. And for the first week or two, it's going to be hard. It is going to feel like a challenge and a chore. But once you set your mind, you've got to make a commitment to yourself. And then you'll notice that after a week or two, you start to feel so much better. And it's just making that initial, let's start something. And again, it doesn't have to be, quote, exercise to start. Start with an activity. And this is how you can talk to your client. Start with an activity they enjoy. Just a brief walk. If they like to go for a swim, especially now that summer's here, if they like to do, go walk the dog, maybe a little bit longer than they have been, maybe walk at a faster pace and then get into different things. Start with something they enjoy, then sprinkle in the exercises. Again, Marty and I have talked multiple times about accidental exercise and different things that you can do that kind of sprinkles in more bang for their buck when they're doing something. I think that's important. And then you start to combine them both and you're going to see long-term benefits because they stick with it. And second of all, too, then they're going to feel better. They're going to move better. They're going to perform better. And then as you're working with them as a trainer, you're going to get all these accolades and you didn't do anything besides getting them to begin moving, which is something they hadn't been doing to start.
And even something simple is standing up more often. I think I remember this data pretty accurately. Wendy, I'm sitting right now at a stand-up desk. Soon as we're always done recording, I'm always standing back up. So if the numbers come to ring true in my mind, if you stand even just a third of your 8-hour workday, it's like you ran 2 to 3 marathons that year from a calorie expenditure. Plus now you look at posture and all these other things. So sometimes just simply getting them to stand longer.
Yes. Sit less, move more. So how much activity do we need? Globally, 28% of adults aged 18 and that were not active enough in 2016, men 23% and women 32%. So that's crazy when you think about 18 and older. So we're not talking about seniors. We're not talking about active older adults or not active older adults. We're talking about 18 and over, which is pretty sad. But this means that they don't meet the global recommendations of at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity of physical activity per week. Guys, these statistics are scary because we are sitting more as a society. We are moving less. Our obesity rates are out the roof. Overweight rates are out the roof. Our diets, even though we have access to healthier choices, we're still, because it's cheaper, sometimes choosing non-healthy choices. And so therefore, we're not seeing these statistics change. But a lot of times it starts because people just don't want to move.
Yeah. And for those of you just joining today on the Master Instructor Roundtable, Marty Miller here with co-host Wendy Batts. We're talking about exercise versus activity. And Wendy, the key thing here is you kind of mentioned it before. It's easy to kind of get in a rut and let things fall off. And then there's that hurdle of initially getting things going. But when you look at this data, it's alarming. And then when you tie this into the leading causes of death, it's basically the best thing we can say is exercise is the best vaccine for anything we may face, right?
Mhm.
When you look at, I've never seen a research study that says, hey, to prevent X, Y, or Z, never exercise, right? Now, we're hopefully assuming that people exercise at the right intensity with the right form and technique so they don't get injured orthopedically. That being said, you're not going to see that, oh, you want to reduce heart disease, stop exercising. You want to reduce all these different forms of cancer, stop exercising. So we've got to get people moving. We've got to get people more active. Both exercise and activity, the boxes need to be checked. But, I know Rick Ritchie has said this. I know I've heard other people say it. You could work out 2 to 3 days a week and still be sedentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's just it. It's like, what is working out? And because you've got to think, and how long are you working out? Think about how many hours are in a day, a week, a month, and what is the comparison? And then when you look at these stats, when they're saying anywhere from 175 to 300, minutes. I mean, Marty, you even said that it's 50 minutes a day on average if you're working out 6 days a week, taking a day off. If you don't want to work out 6 days a week, you don't have to, but just make sure that when you're doing it, you're committed, you're working hard, you're really pushing yourself to different limits, you're challenging your abilities to go into things and doing things that you're not comfortable with. And when you do that, you're going to start to see a lot of health benefits, not only just physically, but you're going to feel so much better. And then you're going to do what Marty does. He feels better when he does something every day. And me too, but I just, you had said that. So, but movement is medicine. That even made one of, when you're looking at the ACSM reports or whatever that were launched on these trends, movement is medicine is actually a trend, which is crazy. And there's a lot of things out there to support that. So just really trying to become very active, doing things that you enjoy, doing daily activities, but then also realizing that exercise is going to be important, and using weights and doing things that you enjoy in classes. That's also, both of them are going to be beneficial. So, but they are different.
Right. And, you could work out 2 days a week for half hour. That's awesome. It's something. But if you're not active the other days, you're checking the box, but you're not where we need to everyone be. So I think we hammered that point. So sedentary behavior, what is that, right? So that's defined as a mean of greater than 6 hours of daytime sitting or lying down. That's a lot of people, right? So sedentary behavior has been shown to increase with older age and is a risk factor for disease. But I'm telling you, the jobs nowadays, and then people's free time and all that, I bet you that 6 hours a day for a lot of people would be, to them, not hard to check that box if they're sitting for at least 6 hours a day.
Well, think about the desk job, jobs that are out there. Think about the people that are in the car.
Commutes.
Yeah. People that have to go from different places, business to business. And then again, unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more of this in youth. I mean, because of the games, gaming is killing us, and of course we don't always make the best choices when we game. We eat chips and drink, maybe drink some things that we shouldn't be drinking. And so 6 hours is nothing.
Right. I was from that generation. I won't age you, Wendy, where I waited for my parents to wake up. I was outside until they called me to come home. And I bet you I was outside 8 to 10 hours easily on a Saturday, and, coming home from school, another 3 or 4 hours before it got dark. So yeah, I didn't come from that generation where we wanted to be inside all day.
That was me too. And there was not a cell phone. So I needed to know when it hit this amount of darkness, it was time for dinner and I better be in. So, but then again, too, it was a little bit safer times as well. Do you want to say?
Yeah. So there's a ton of research out there. Obviously, anything that we try to do here with NASM, unless it's just our opinion from experience, but that's still anchored in research, is let's take a peek of what's happening from a research standpoint. So here's just one of the research articles. So mortality and cause of death in physical activity and insufficient physical activity participants. It's been this longitudinal follow-up study using a national health screening cohort. Well, guess what the research showed? If you move more, you prevent the leading causes of death, substantially so. So you can see this is, high level respected journal. So more and more research is coming out that We need to keep people moving to decrease the metabolic syndromes. And obviously metabolic syndrome leads to a lot of other issues health-wise. So, not surprising that this research is out there.
I'm not surprised either. And we're going to start to see this more and more, I think. So, but then again, too, when you keep looking at some of these different graphs, and Marty, I know that, obviously you guys can see where we're getting this data, but physical activity reduces the risk of diseases. We've talked about that. We know this, guys, but when you're looking at type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancers, musculoskeletal diseases, and depression, exercise or physical activity or both have shown to be such a positive, they allow positive changes in people, just of how they feel and how they interact with other individuals. They want to get out and be more social, which is also shown to really, especially in the depression side, because I know since the pandemic, those numbers unfortunately are going in the wrong direction. And so we're starting to see kind of the falls from that. But when you're thinking about physical inactivity, this is one of the 5 leading global risks of mortality. And worldwide, physical inactivity is the main cause or risk factor for approximately 30% of ischemic heart disease burden, 21 to 25% of breast and colon cancers, and 6% of deaths. So not good.
Yeah, it is definitely an issue. It's the leading cause of death here in America for both males and females. And it's a huge part of that's behavioral based. I'm not going to say it's only behavioral based, but there's a lot of things that can be done to alleviate the stress on the cardiovascular system if you are eating healthy, sleeping, the stress, but you got to move, and you got to move at moderate levels. And again, I Wendy, you and I will not allow any excuse. I don't care what injury you have. If you are determined to move at a moderate intensity, we can find a way to do it. It might be in a pool, might be an upper body ergometer. It might be a recline bike. Who knows what we'll figure out. But we will find a way to get that heart rate up appropriately if it's the goal of the client. So we have to focus on getting people to move and, just like the OPT model, progress through that phases of training and increase the intensities as we go.
Yes. So when we're thinking about physical activity, this can be one of the factors that extends lifespan. Increasing evidence has demonstrated that physical activity can decrease mortality, which we talked about, especially mortality from cardiovascular disease and cancer. And guys, I mean, I'm telling you, unfortunately, we're hearing more and more, cases of cancer. There's different types of drugs that they can do, different types of, radiation, a lot of different processes. However, you know what? Try to avoid it altogether. Unfortunately, people, they have genetic and, they're predisposed genetically, myself being one of them. I'll openly admit that. But some of the things of just being able to move more and being more active can help fight some of these diseases and numbers and statistics that unfortunately we're seeing more and more of.
Right. Let's control what we can control, right? Wendy, I joke about this before in the past when we were talking about hypertrophy and things like that. I picked the wrong parents. So I can't control that. Same thing if you're predisposed to other things. You can't control the cards you've been dealt as far as that, the DNA, but we can all control what we eat, sleep, stress, and physical activity. Those are without a doubt, if it's a priority. I always say, if you want to see someone's priority, watch what they do. Right. So, I can say this because I know this from my full-time job. If you're a Netflix junkie, guess what? You can still watch Netflix on your cardio equipment. So there's ways to sneak this in. It just has to become top of mind and become a priority. And then you are giving yourself the best chance of fighting all of these things that maybe are inevitable for some people. But again, we don't know what we don't know. So could somebody push that off 5 years, 10 years, or permanently? Or can you prevent something by living a healthy, active life for as long as possible?
Yes. Small changes. It doesn't have to be all at once, but small
consistency. That's the bit. If you looked at dosing, I'd rather take micro dosing for your lifespan starting today than just let me go into a 3-month training program, try to annihilate it, and then I drop out.
That's true. And that's unfortunately what we see in January at most gyms. And then, ghost town come, after spring break usually. Right. So the key takeaways is, are you focusing on both exercise and activity? And I think it's important to think about the differences. What do you do throughout the day? What are some changes that maybe in the activities that you're doing, you can make a little more challenging to burn more calories throughout? Are you tracking your activity? Again, there's so many different devices out there that tracks how many steps that you take each and every day, how much movement you have. I know for mine, I get things that light up and say, I've been sitting too long. It's time to get up and move. There's different alarms that you can set to in some of these tracking devices that are out there, just making yourself more aware, showing your clients that these tools are available to them as well, especially if they're starting to commit. And, we said this, movement is medicine, making sure that you're just putting a little bit of things in that can make a big significant change long-term. That would be super important. And then if you do have clients that are sedentary, you have to be very, and you talk about this, Marty, because you did your doctorate on it, but the way that you approach it, you have to be sensitive. You have to be very empathetic to someone, but then try to help them, again, make the smaller changes, talk to them about physical activity, start with exercises activities they enjoy, sprinkle in some exercises. So again, we're working on the muscles and the things that are going to support our bones. And then at that point, do a combination of both, and then try to hit those guidelines that we talked about.
Yeah, we're talking about this in a very clinical manner because we're speaking to you as fitness professionals, just going through the science. Then there's the art of how you pull this all together. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, how I communicate this to somebody who's struggling or I need to motivate. And we've done some things on that in the past, and we can always come back around. Feel free to let us know if you have questions on how would you address somebody with these issues. But peer to peer, we need to just hit you with the science, and we need people to move more. We need to move better, and we need to have them move at higher intensities as is appropriate to them. So if you get those key takeaways and then sneak things in, I'll park further away in the Costco parking lot. I will purposely do all kinds of stuff to set myself up for success. It's not by accident, but it's easy for me to think about it, and it's always the top of mind. So just getting that shift for you, and then teaching your clients to shift their focus as well.
Yes. So if you guys have any questions, or if there's topics that you want Marty and I to discuss, always feel free to email us or let us know, because we want to obviously bring up topics that are going to be of interest to you and not just what we think we want to talk about or what we think you guys want to hear. So if you want to email me, you can find me at wendy.batts@nasm.org, or you can find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13.
And my information right here, dr.martymiller72. And then email marty.miller@nasm.org. Wendy, thank you for all of your tips and pointers. I think you really hit on a lot of things that people can take away. Hopefully all of you enjoyed it. And most importantly, we look forward to seeing you next week on the Master Instructor Roundtable.